Yeah,
And
sure.
people need to think about that. I need to think about it because my sort of I think my home office has improved definitely. But there's still things that you can certainly you need that low lighting ideally. You need to have some, you know, pro podcasting stuff. That's generally how it should be. Um,
Yeah, I guess so. I think I set this up during COVID at the start, kind of for my desktop PC and so on, because at that point we thought we are going to be working remotely potentially forever, right?
right,
So
right.
I think back then I set it up with a microphone and so on, and now, yeah, I think the kind of custom, let's say, backgrounds these days are like virtual are actually great. Sometimes they even confuse me if the person is actually in a cafe or not, which I guess
Yeah,
is on
yeah.
me. But I do think if you have the alternative of having something authentic behind you, I think that also maybe calms you down during meetings as well when you see it on your own background.
I actually think that's a really interesting debate. Like, do you go with a virtual background because obviously it might look better than your normal background? I think you can on that. However, is it also kind of dishonest? Do you know what I mean? It's like
Hmm.
sometimes you get like faked out, and it's like, do I really want to see these enhancements? When in fact, I personally wouldn't mind so much. It's an interesting theory, folks. What have you got on your background? Do you think about it? Is it a personal branding issue? Is it an employer branding issue? We are recruiters here. Like, are you thinking about this when your hiring manager is doing an interview with a candidate? Have you coached your hiring manager as to what's going on in the background, where the camera angle is, and all that type of stuff? Might make a bit of a difference, you know. Worth thinking about. Worth thinking about this. Anyway, welcome everybody to Breakthrough Live on Air. It's episode 275, bringing it to you every Friday, no fail. And today, when I say no fail, I mean no fail because I'm on the other side of the world today. I'm delighted to be in Bangkok, Thailand, and with my good friend Andre, with whom we had fantastic food and a couple of drinks yesterday. So great to see you join the show, Andre. About why don't we just kick off there? Like, can you quickly introduce yourself? Who are you? What it is you do, man?
Sure. So, hey everybody. So, yeah, around 10 years in the industry. I'm originally from the Czech Republic, moved to Scotland, moved to the UK, and now I moved to Thailand 3.5 years ago to join Agoda. Most of my background is in sourcing and recruitment, and worked across agency, RPO, startup, big tech, and now for an online travel part of Booking Holdings.
Indeed. And Andre, you've got one of those names that's unpronounceable, or at least I feel it's difficult for me to pronounce. Andre Prochaska. Is that right? Prochaska? How do you do it?
Yeah, that's about right. Yeah,
No,
yeah.
no. How's it pronounced in Czech?
All right. Back home, we would say Ondřej Procházka. So
Prochaska. With a
Ondřej
big
Procházka.
roll of the R. Yeah,
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 that's,
yeah.
that's pretty good.
Well, yeah, I'll do it once and I'll fail. But anyway, great to have you on the show. You're actually the co-host, and there's a special job I failed to brief you on. So I'm not even sure
Oh,
whether you
fair
can
enough. Let's do it.
deliver on your responsibilities. But you're meant to actually review the newsletter and have a chat with me about that. Now I suspect you have not actually read the newsletter from last week, have you? No, I didn't think so. That's all right. We're just gonna get our crowd onto we're gonna go direct to panel and start speaking to folks that are experts in recruiting in Thai in the Thai market and see what's what. I'm gonna come at this with a completely ignorant point of view. So I'm very interested to bring on folks that have had the effort to do this and work with us on this. Okay, so firstly, before I bring all the rest of the panel on, Andre, let's sort of ask you. You've had 3 years recruiting in this marketplace. What have you experienced here that you thought, okay, I didn't know this, but actually it's a significant sort of thing in recruiting in this area?
Sure. So I think for me, the shock came around us recruiting globally into Thailand, right? So a lot of the main learnings we have is around how differently potential candidates look at a career in Thailand, in Southeast Asia, how the motivations differ, how the timelines differ, how a lot of the decision making kind of differs around, for instance, previously pitching people to move to London and pitching people to move to Thailand. It just makes for a very different conversation. A lot of the times very nice conversation. Nonetheless, the reality is a lot of the talent we reach out to and we work with, they never considered Thailand as a location. They were never aware there's maybe a technology hub here, especially if they are based in Europe, in the US, in South America. They are not quite aware. So a lot of the learnings came around how do we engage new talent Thailand that never even considered not only the company but also the location. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, in the
So
more local landscape. Oh, go on.
I would call that like destination branding, right?
Yeah.
Where sometimes every place obviously is different. But you need to be aware that for people, let's say you're doing the expat recruitment, it's a case where potentially you obviously need to sell the environment. You need to know what the qualities are of the country, of the city, or all that kind of stuff. But also maybe some of the tougher things because you can't just assume you can't lie to people. You've got to be honest with what that move's going to make. So yeah, very very interesting. Tell us about the local. We'll talk about that as the rest of the guys come on. But tell us about the local hiring as well, because people obviously you recruit that live and work here, maybe the Thai nationals, etc. So how is that different? What was your learning there?
So I'll say I have different experience from what we see coming to Agoda and what I kind of read about the external economic data, right? So the talent we see coming to Agoda, I'm always impressed. Like really, the education and the people coming in, the talent coming in is amazing. So that's my personal experience, right? Like coming back to Czech Republic, I think I would have to adjust now again, just to different culture and everything. However, when I look at the more economic kind of macroeconomic data, I do understand there's a shortage of labor workforce. I think it's partially to the declining workforce into declining age, right? And I do believe roughly 14% or so of the labor is highly skilled workforce or classified as such. So I think a lot of the skills building and so on as Thailand moves to, I think what they call Thailand 4.0, which is the more innovation focused economy. That is going to be one of the main challenges. But when I look at what the people I speak with during interview process, that doesn't quite correlate. People I speak with are quite impressive always, right? But I do understand there's the general economic data.
Yeah, yeah, interesting. I mean, obviously, Thailand. I don't know. Again, speaking from someone who's from the outside and not being aware whatsoever about what the working conditions are and economic conditions are here. But it does obviously have very positive image internationally, I would say. Obviously very important tourism type of spot. But also with organizations like Agoda being here, it kind of gives the vibe that actually there's some significant technology businesses here. Obviously, there's loads of resources here as well. Population, I think, is still young, I think, and growing. So potentially there's workforce there as well. So yeah, lots of interesting things to think about. Okay, cool. Let's bring on some of our guests here. I'm going to bring on anybody, by the way, who's basically living in Thailand and has some experience. So if you're interested in coming on, just stick your hand up. Let me know in the chat on the right hand side. I'm going to bring Maka on first. I do believe Gary might be joining us from the UK as well. So we're going to get some people that are kind of expats here first. Let's have a look. Is he here? Oh, there he is. Cool. Should be getting an invite to come on, and then we'll see where we're at.
Right background.
Okay, cool. There he is. How you doing, man?
I'm doing okay. How are you, gents?
Yeah, great. Great to connect, dudes. Thanks for jumping on and being so keen to participate in this matter. Why don't you quickly introduce yourself, tell you what it is you do, man?
Sure. So I'm the head of talent acquisition for True Corporation. True is part of CP Group, which is an absolute giant ecosystem of companies across the whole of Thailand, and in part a little bit further across Southeast Asia. So True itself originally was the telco, but now is more kind of tech telco. It went through a big M&A last year with DTAC, which is parent company is Telenor in Northern Europe. So yeah, that's me. I've been over in Thailand now just past 9 years. Started with Agoda many moons ago, but I've just passed 3.5 years with True.
Fantastic. So great to have you on the show, Matt. And well done doing 9 years. That's amazing. Do you feel like completely acclimated to the environment here, or do you still feel okay? I'm half in, half out in terms of sort of your own sort of experience.
It's a funny one. Andre mentioned right at the beginning around people's awareness of Thailand, and I was for me, working in a foreign country was when I started working in London as a Mancunian. That was a real culture shock. But to come home to Thailand, I'd never considered that at all. And we signed up, myself and my wife, we came over for a year. And after a year, thought, you know what, this is okay. And then you renew your visa and work permit every year. After about 3 years, you stop having the conversation at home. Shall we stay longer? Shall we stay longer? We just did. And now it's, you kind of glibly look and think, oh, well, that's 9 years gone. That'll soon be 10 years gone as well. So it's just normal life now. I go back to the UK to see my folks. That's my holiday. I live and work here. My family's here also. So yeah, totally acclimatized, I think. Apart from the heat sometimes, it still gets to me, but I think that's quite normal for everyone.
That's actually a factor for people coming in. Obviously, people need to be aware that the heat is very, very different from anywhere that's outside of Southeast Asia, I think. So if you're anywhere in Europe, anywhere in the US, I think this is a very different type of feeling. Very humid, very lot of moisture in the air, that kind of thing. So that's worth bearing in mind as part of the lifestyle here. So worth discussing in a bit. But let's firstly welcome Gary here onto the show. Gary, great to see you. Thank you so much for joining. I know it's early in the UK at this point. Why don't you quickly introduce yourself? Who are you? What it is you do, Gary?
Okay, thanks, Hong. I'm Gary Wallacott. I'm a executive search consultant, headhunter, whatever you want to call us. I don't mind. I've been in Thailand for nearly 30 years and still not used to the heat.
I can see we're up leveling as we go. It's like
not a competition, but
Mac has been 9 and you've been 30. Wow, go on.
It's warmer now in Thailand than it used to be, and I think we can thank climate change for that. We used to have actually cool winters, but not anymore. Not to digress too much, but we used to have 3 or 4 months of cool weather. Now we're lucky if we get 3 or 4 days, let alone 3 or 4 weeks. So things have changed in Thailand. But I'm not here to talk about the weather. I'm here to talk about the recruiting scene. It's a very interesting and dynamic recruitment life in Thailand. I've learned a lot. And come back to me later, Hung. But that's me for now.
No, great to have you on the show, Gary. I've also shared the links to everyone on the show here in the chat, so feel free to connect with all of those folks here. Let's do some broad strokes. In terms of the hiring that is done here, how does it sort of where do recruiters tend to operate? Is it a certain type of function, certain type of role, certain level of seniority? Would you say that it's kind of like a Dubai style thing where, the recruiters are coming in from the outside, are typically also hiring from the outside? How does the local recruiting work? I guess, give us a summary on how you see the recruiting field. I'll open this up to anybody to chip in with some thoughts here.
Well, I'll start as an agency recruiter. Most of our clients are foreign companies, multinationals, who are looking to recruit Thai nationals, probably 4 out of 5. And so that's an interesting dynamic because the workforce is actually shrinking. The population is shrinking. Thailand's already reached peak population, much like China.
I did not know that. Really? I did not know that. How many people in Thailand?
About 70 million.
Mm-hmm.
But probably only about 15 million are actually in the workforce that are available to people. There's a huge agricultural population, much like here in the UK. And something like 40% of the workforce is in agriculture, but they only produce 10 to 15% of the output of the country. So there's a massive dysfunction there. But of those people who are available to us in the workforce for CP Group and for Agoda, a very small fraction of people, which is how we make our money, which is the good thing. That small population, that small crowd of people who are available to foreign companies, which we're all representing here today, it enables us to have an edge, as it were. But it also makes it very difficult for any company that's trying to recruit talent because talent's scarce on the ground.
Right. So basically, there's I didn't know. Sorry, Andre, you're about to say something, but let me just summarize what Gary said. I didn't realize the population scenario. I just assumed that Thailand had the demographic trend was a little bit more positive, but it may well be they're just on trend with everyone else. Like people have less and less kids. That's been the prevailing thing over, let's say, last couple of decades. Maybe you're also losing people from outside. I don't know whether there's an immigration issue where perhaps Thailand exports people a little bit. And there's a significant portion of the workforce that's kind of there is in the old agricultural area, and therefore it typically isn't on our radar screen to recruit those folks. That seems to be the situation. But as you say, that's a labor shortage. That's the reason where recruiters of in-house or direct have a space to play. Andre, you about to say something, I think?
Sure. I just wanted to highlight on the side of more like the internal kind of hiring, right, of a bigger company here. A lot of the focus, and I might be representing other teams on this rather than just my sourcing team, but is on relationships with universities, right? Making sure we work very heavily with our kind of local referrals, right? Making sure that we really just focus on where the top talent is, the people that have analytical skills, the people that are driven for the future, and we kind of have that more long-term presence. Because yes, definitely agreed with Gary. I think some of the as I mentioned, roughly 14% of the workforce is classified as a highly skilled workforce, and there is this tough move from if you're in agriculture, the fundamental skills you need for working in an office, be it communication skills, digital skills, and so on, are obviously hard to teach. I think I understand Thailand is focusing on this and on building this. But for now, it's really key that we connect with the people that can build, the global tech company we are building here in Thailand.
Yeah, very, very interesting. And by the way, this is kind of just in a personal within personal reach of my own memories here, family memory. Like my grandparents were agricultural farmers in Hong Kong. Not educated. Grandma can't read. Literally in the fields. That's what she was doing. And so yeah, there's no way in her generation, there'd be a possibility of getting into an office job. Best she'd be able to do would be the manual labor stuff, cleaner, that kind of work. That's kind of what my mom did as well, even though she did have some education. So yeah, it's not like mega distant for a lot of people. This, but yeah, interesting to know what that numbers are. So 15% of the working population is generally what you could say that's the labor force that you deal with. One of the ways in which you can do this well as an elite employer is interact with the universities who, of course, are producing these people. So university graduate campus recruitment is Maka, is that your experience also in how it works?
Yeah, I think if I look at our own experience, we're probably about 98% local hire, and we're all fishing in the same pool. There's probably not so much going on in other cities outside of Bangkok that we're looking to bring people into. So we're all fighting in the Bangkok space for our talent. I would say maybe the other 2% would be international Thai returning back to Thailand, or maybe even the international graduates who are coming back to Thailand because maybe UK, US, they're not going to get work permits. So I think that even that smaller percentage of people is worth quite a lot in this market, having that international exposure, that international way of working, because the working culture here locally is very unique. And for anyone coming to Thailand from an international perspective, who's not experienced it before in the world of work, will find it like falling off the edge of a cliff. So yeah, we're largely local. It's been quite an up and down market recently. I find there's a lot more people I speak to that are happy just to leave their job behind because they're so confident that they'll pick something up. The number of times I speak to people, I'm not working at the moment, I left my job. Oh, that's it. It becomes more and more of a conversation point with candidates than ever before. So there's probably a lot of confidence in the candidate market to get placed. But yeah, it's been a reasonable year. Still coming out of the COVID years, as we know, but it's becoming a bit more exciting, a bit more lively.
It's really interesting.
Sometimes that's misplaced confidence. I get emails from people saying they've been on holiday in Thailand. They have, not to be rude about Sheffield. Where are you from, Hung? It's somewhere up there, isn't it? Not to be rude about
Hammer Sheffield, mate. I hate the place. No, I'm actually from further north. I'm from the town called Billingham. Which is probably not better than Sheffield, to be fair.
Up there somewhere. Yeah. And they say they've been on holiday in Thailand. And they love the food. They love the lifestyle. And now they want to relocate to Thailand. And can I help them find a job? And what do you say to that? It's a very polite no. Because as Machar says, it's working in Thailand is very different from working elsewhere in the world. There's a unique culture. It has its own peculiarities, like everywhere does. but you just can't transplant somebody from Europe or the UK or, heaven forbid, the US into Thailand and expect that they're going to work out well. Australians do rather better. Australians, this is the backyard for Australians, so that can work. But really bringing somebody in with without Southeast Asian experience is going to be a recipe for disaster. And I'm sure you two gentlemen who work for companies, one international, one local, you'll have seen that. They look great, they sound great, but then culturally it's a mess.
All right, let's talk about this. Let's not be afraid to generalize. I don't want anybody to lean into stereotypes or whatever. But we in order for us to get a grip of this, with all the caveats apply clearly. Not everyone is like this, etc., etc. But why is there such a struggle, let's say, for people who haven't had sort of broad experience of Southeast Asian culture? Is there what are the differences, as two of you both mentioned already? Work style. Let's start there. What is the different work style here?
So we're in quite a different value system within Thailand. We have the concept, the societal value of face, which is a huge one to navigate, which I think even after 9 years, I myself haven't got to. But there is a great book by Larry Persons about the face in Thai society, which can help any expat navigate around that. But we may be in a meeting anywhere across the world, and you're having two-way conversation, and it's just very, very backwards and forwards. And you can take it as read that if you said something, it's been understood, and there's been a reply, then everything's okay. It might not be the case here all the time. What you may convey, you may get agreement, you may get acknowledgement, but that doesn't mean you get understanding. And there is maybe a little nervousness around saying, no, I don't understand, or no, I don't get it, for fear of that losing face. It's a much higher value here than we can understand if we just kind of live and work in UK or another market. You can win or lose people on the basis of a conversation. And if you lose them for a very, very long time. So yeah, it's that can only just break the back of it. That could be a podcast in itself around face in Thai society and how it impacts the workplace. But for an expat to get in quickly, need to understand very, very quickly.
I'll say from my perspective, actually I had less of a cultural shock coming to the UK from the Czech Republic compared to from the UK to Thailand overall. It might be the environment at Agoda, could be. I would summarize it as the kind of how sensitive people can be around what disagreement or conflict looks like is just a little bit more on the sensitive side compared to, I guess, Czech Republic for sure. And I would say if you would be moving to Thailand, it just kind of depends which culture are you coming from. Are you coming from a culture that's very open, direct, very easy to be disagreeable kind of communication, or are you coming from a culture that's more agreeable overall, right? Are you coming from a family or from a city or from a culture that really is kind of where you can challenge your elders in your family during a dinner, or are you coming from the opposite? And I think that's just like where you're gonna be.
So the Dutch have got no chance here, basically. They're just gonna come in and just offend everybody. But there's a wonderful book by Erin Meyer called The Culture Map. I'm not sure that any of you guys have read it, but it's quite famous in our industry, particularly because it's written with the view that there are different cultural kind of communication styles. That it's all in the subtext, and one of those sort of ways in which people encapsulate it is whether you're conflict tolerant or conflict sort of avoidant in terms of communication style. And Asia generally, I think, East Asia, maybe also now Southeast Asia, now I'm beginning to understand, is very much conflict avoidant. So in other words, you may not necessarily secure agreement, but there wouldn't be an outright sort of refutation in public, because that would be shameful to you to do that. To create that kind of contention, whereas there's other cultures sort of are very much prepared to do so. The UK actually is pretty conflict avoidant, apparently. So we like to hint, we like to drop, this, that, and the other. We like to speak in code often. Where we do, if we're not effusive in saying that's amazing, it's basically saying it's terrible. So that kind of style. So I wonder whether that's a useful book to think about. Yeah, thanks for the share of the the book by Larry Persons as well. This type of anthropological stuff is super interesting. Let's stay with the anthropology. What are the ways in which would you say the Thai culture is different from, I don't know, let's pick any place in Europe as a standard example. Other things people might want to bear in mind, if they do decide, yeah, I want to give Thailand a go. What's the couple of bullet points to give this person aside from being aware of this conflict avoidance style?
Well, let's compare to maybe the Netherlands then, because it's a very direct culture, much like in the UK or the Nordic countries. Maka touched on it earlier, because those returning Thais, they're absolute gold when we can get our hands on them. But what we find is that there is that reluctance to be direct. And saying yes doesn't mean, yes, I've understood, and yes, I'll do it. It means, yes, I hear you. And that's sometimes as far as it goes. So from a very direct culture, that is going to cause problems. How to get around that? Well, you've just got to learn how to ask the right question. And once you start, and both of these gentlemen here with me, they know, it's training people, training foreigners. If foreigners are going to come here to Thailand, training them to ask the right question, not to necessarily accept the answer that's given, but just to dig down a little bit. So that's one of the things every day is a learning day in Thailand. Every day is a school day. It hasn't stopped after all this time. But I'm very interested to hear what the other two guys have to say.
I agree on that. It's actually the first book I was given when I landed was by, it's called Working with the Thais. It's quite a clunky title, but an old book from the 80s by Henry Holmes, which is very good just to understand, if you're managing a team, how to manage, how to integrate. It makes it sound like we're talking about a unique set of species of people that don't exist anywhere else in the world. It's not quite like that. I've also found when I started out, Thai people very forgiving, very accepting, want to help, even if they don't know how to help. That wanting to help as well. Directions is a hilarious one, where you'll be directed somewhere because someone doesn't want to say they don't know. So we'll give you directions to the place where you think you're going to go, and it's not. It's in the opposite direction. But rather than saying I don't know, you'll get directions to go there. That's the one to navigate. There's words in the language also which have, I think maybe Gary can confirm on this, double meaning, like Kring Jai, which seems to have different meanings around being respectful but not disturbing people, not opposing or offending. But it's one of those words that can be used in many different contexts. And if you've not got the language capability, and I don't really have, then it's hard to pick up on the tone and the mood of when certain words are used and why they're being used. But a little goes a long way. And if you can show that you're learning and trying from a Western perspective and picking up some language or going out for lunch with the team or trying things you haven't tried, that goes a long way. And that's the start of breaking the back of this. But it takes a long time to get there.
I'm glad you said this at the end, because I'm now thinking about if I was listening to this back home or somewhere in Europe, I would be really worried about coming over. I would expect total difficulty, inability to read anyone's face, just really hard time. And I just want to say, like, it's not really like that. You're gonna be fine if you find an opportunity and move over. As you said towards the end, Thai people are some of the nicest people I've met, as a group or as individuals. This country have a bunch of people that moved here for jobs already. You're not likely going to be the first in your team or first in your organization and so on. It's going to be all right. Just pay attention to people around you and really try to kind of find how to effectively work together. People make it work every day. You're going to make it work too.
Yeah, very interesting. Very good. How does this it got me thinking, how does this manifest when you're interacting with candidates? And I'm aware there may be a distinction between, let's say, a Thai, pure native Thai person who basically has lived and worked all their lives here in the UK, in Thailand, for instance, compared to, let's say, a Thai person who's worked in different parts of the world and has come back as diaspora. I'm assuming there's going to be sort of different ways in which we interact with those populations, given the fact that perhaps we'll be more comfortable speaking to someone who's worked in outside of Thailand. But how does it manifest on the candidate side? Let's say where we're not getting a definitive response. For instance, if I ask a candidate, "Are you interested in this job?" Maybe that's not a flat yes no, as you might get in other cultures. Does it manifest in that way? Like, do I need to keep going deeper into that context and what that meaning is before I accept the response?
Well, one thing, I think the other two gents will agree with me. Hierarchy. It's really important in Thailand. And I'll have the researchers say, I've been trying to get hold of this candidate for days, weeks, whatever. And they've sent them LinkedIn messages or called their mobile or whatever. No response. When I send a LinkedIn request, I get a response the next day because I'm managing partner. I'm not a researcher. And so that's one way of getting hold of people. But, and I'm sure the other two gents will agree with me, that the talent pool is quite small. We're only looking for people who are actually interested to move. We're targeting passive candidates, as I'm sure the other two gents are. The active candidates, there's millions of them out there. They're on job boards the whole time, sending resumes in for every position. We don't need them. We aren't interested in them. But at the same time, because it's so tight with the talent pool, getting the right people is absolutely essential. Making a mistake, recruitment, and we've all done it, it's going to cost you probably a couple of years of that person's salary, the wasted time, the opportunity cost, all those things, they really add up. It's difficult recruiting in Thailand. Getting the right people in and keeping the right people is difficult. Foreign companies are coming in more and more, which is great, but the talent pool isn't growing to match. And we're looking at local Thais mostly, and those golden returning Thais. Foreigners, I think Agoda probably has more foreigners than anybody else in Thailand, as far as I can tell. CP Group may not, but it's difficult to hire foreigners as well. The complications around getting work permits for people, all those kinds of things. Big companies can deal with it, smaller companies, and we mostly represent SMEs in our work at Horton International. And so they have to think very carefully about whether they want a foreigner or whether we can find a Thai national who's up to the job and can do it and is interested in the job. That's the other thing.
I jump in and I agree with what Gary's saying there also. I think if I reflect on the experience of dealing with candidates, I'm probably not doing as much hands-on recruiting as I used to do. But the conversations with candidates are generally always very, very pleasant. There's not many challenging questions from a candidate to an organization, which is disappointing because I would like to get those challenging questions. But we're the organization and they're the candidates, so there's that kind of need to be liked, a need to appease a little bit. And even asking someone at the end of an interview, do you have any questions? And the stock answer is generally no, which is a huge miss. And that's almost kind of a little bit deflating. So I think sometimes the conversation or the persona, the personality a little bit is almost too passive. Even when it comes to candidate negotiations, which I would expect to be a little bit more challenging, it's pretty much not. And then you might have someone accept a role because they like the hiring manager and they're being quite respectful, but they don't fit the organization, and then they leave after 6 months. So yeah, it probably needs to be a little bit more challenging market from candidates' perspective and from companies' perspectives also.
Also from my side, on top of the kind of how to engage the candidate, right? Also add a perspective of a hiring manager, kind of if you interview that person, if they're a good fit for your team. One of the ways the kind of cultural difference made me change some of the ways how I ask the questions is to phrase them in a way that encourages kind of ownership and proactivity in that kind of interview question. So as an example, in Europe, I could say something along the lines of, okay, let's say as a boss, I set this as targets and this as a way to measure it, this as budget, and this as, let's say, KPIs. You notice it doesn't work. How do you go about it? This question doesn't quite land well in, I think, interviewing local candidates, but I think you can rephrase it and get the same out of it. You can say something along the lines like, okay, imagine you are in charge of a project. That project is supposed to be delivering this. These are the KPIs. You have noticed that something doesn't work. how would you go around proposing a change? So kind of similarly how we discussed kind of like the hierarchy, kind of rephrasing the questions like they are the ones responsible for it in the first place, and just kind of putting them in the driving seat during that interview. And then it's more comfortable to kind of have a challenging back and forth and discussing, okay, well, what if the numbers don't fit the results, and what would you do? And then you can actually get really interesting conversations, and that I do believe that fair but maybe challenging interview results in really engaged candidates that feel that they can learn a lot from their new workplace. So that's kind of how I lead them. And I think one of my learning curves was understanding how do I conduct that sort of interview to get the most out of people, especially if they're coming from university or if they're kind of relatively fresh on the in the labor workforce. Yeah.
That's really interesting. I mean, basically, it gets me thinking about how, the standard interview questions that you'd have need to be culturally localized. So we're talking about the Thai market here, but imagine any market out there. Let's say you end up being an international recruiter, and increasingly companies need to be looking at on the international side as, companies are looking to disperse jobs into different parts of the world to get more efficiency and so on. You might need to then moderate your type of style of questioning based on that local understanding. One of the features that's coming out in a lot of the software we're seeing these days is, put your job description in and it's going to automatically generate a list of questions to ask candidates of that type. So that's going to be quite common, I think, because it's quite a useful tool, give you hiring managers, off you go. But then I'm thinking, okay, that may only be, that's going to be optimized for one cultural environment, basically where that software is being built, and it may not transpose that easily to other environments where those questions may not land very well. So yeah, some interesting localization work might have to start happening in some of these tech interview some of these tech platforms.
Can I give a caveat to that? Very quickly, I still start with the normal question that I have in general for years. But I just look at who I'm speaking with, right? Because individual kind of personalities and everything overrides everything else. So there are so many situations where the person is super happy to push back against whatever. I don't need to rephrase the question and so on. So I would still start from the general question and then kind of understand how do I position the question to get the most out of that interview. But yeah, thanks.
Good stuff. Gary, going to you. This may be a question only you can answer, but if Andre and Maka have any thoughts on this, please do come through. I'm thinking about from a business development perspective. So let's say you're looking to bring additional customers into Horton. How does that work? Is it more brand building and getting inbound coming in, or is there such a thing as cold calling, or is there such a thing as like going out to customers and saying, "Do you need support?"
We tend not to do very much cold calling. The chambers of commerce are very good in Thailand, the international chambers of commerce, and the particular standout ones would be the American, the British, and the Australian in terms of networking with people. The German chamber and the Singapore chamber are also very good. So those would be the nationalities of the companies that we tend to work with, Europeans. But it's about visibility. Of course, the best marketing we can ever do is when our clients recommend us to their friends. And one of the nice things about working in Thailand is that the expat community is quite small and quite tight in very many ways. So people know each other, they'll talk, you'll be invited to a dinner and the head of Citibank, say, is at the table as well. Now, my American counterpart is never going to meet the head of Citibank in the US, ever. So sorry, Josh, about that, but that's the reality. So that kind of thing is really good. But it's about visibility, it's about trust, it's about longevity a little bit as well. I'm fortunate one way or the other to have stayed in Thailand for quite some time. Never planned it that way, just came on a look-see for 2 years and still there. But word moves quickly around town. So a reputation takes ages to build and a moment to destroy. And it's important to hold on to that. And that's true for everybody everywhere. Thailand's no different. But the thing about Thailand that is different is that it's quite a small foreign community overall. And it's important to remember that. Now, Maka, you're a Thai company, Andre's foreign company. very different dynamics recruiting for those companies. Most of our clients are foreign companies, so we're more familiar with that kind of setup.
Yeah, very interesting. Go ahead, Maher.
I was just about to say, yeah, and even within the organization I'm in presently, there are other parts of that organization which might be a little bit more, or let's say less traditional. Traditional is an awful word to use. It sounds derogatory. It's not supposed to be. But you could say the traditional working company, and then there's a modern working company. And I find that more and more of the new generation will automatically kind of move towards digital tech, and they want that modern working environment also. And maybe we will see, maybe by the time I'm retired, that kind of hierarchical will have turned on its head, just because of the volumes of people that are coming through, and the retirement age here is a little bit lower. So there could be that significant shift, maybe by 2024, maybe by about 2050. It's going to be a very, very different working culture, and probably more like we would be used to in the UK, US, Europe, wherever it may be, more like a modern workplace.
Yeah, very, very interesting. And the retirement age is significant because obviously that leads to seniority turnover, right? People will either migrate out or simply, there might be a mandatory situation. I discovered only recently that in China, for instance, there's actually a mandatory retirement. So the company can actually say, right, you're done, because you've hit your retirement age and off you go. And obviously that creates a gap that then gets upfilled by internal promotions, and turnover is faster.
It's the same here.
Same
60 here.
same. Yeah, same. It's 60,
Really?
and the problem is that these brilliant people are being pushed out of companies at 60. Yep. At the same time, we have the declining, shrinking workforce and populations. Doesn't it make sense to hold on to them? They're the best people in your company. And I get candidates who write to me, I'm 61, so I know about being old. I don't think I'm old. And people write to me at 61 and 62 and say, I can't find a job. Like, companies won't take them on. It's insane. It'd be really good to lift the retirement age.
Yes, so there's an ageism issue then in this case. So the person might be forced out literally by law or by sort of dictated by the company. And that individual may not wish to retire or may not wish to set up a company, but actually want to continue to work. But the doors are shut because of the age, right? Because, I don't know, companies feel, the person's too expensive or too senior coming in. There's not a space there. Like,
it isn't the question. It's the law. It's just difficult to hire people after 60.
Very, very interesting. What about things like basic stuff? Like, are there such a thing as internships here? Like, can you get people in that are kind of not in work, the sort of in student, come in and get them in for 3 months and so, and then they go back to university, and then maybe offer them a job. Does that sort of scenario happen at the entry level sort of end of the spectrum?
It does. The internship timelines are interesting. My understanding is that a lot of the universities don't work to the same calendar. So if you look back at a UK example, you'd expect to pick up your interns between July, August, for example, because everyone's on holiday. Not always the case here, but internships absolutely. For ourselves, we have a great graduate program going. I think the graduate market in general is very, very buoyant. I think Andre mentioned this quite early on, getting the new grads, developing those university relationships. But I feel like I'm saying the same thing over using that traditional word. University is still quite traditional, and there's not so much evidence of, say, careers advisory services like you might see across the rest of the world. So preparing for the world of work is left to the employer. Stakeholders are actually looking for ready now, cookie cutter, whereas there still seems to be that little bit gap between graduating and getting up to speed and getting ready for the workplace. But undoubtedly that population is there and available on an internship level, not so much apprenticeship, but more starting internship and then backfilling the graduate pipeline.
Yeah, very, very interesting. folks, I want to move on to assessment. One of the big things I think that's happening in the world of recruitment is just an increase of using different assessment styles. Previously CV review, interview, face-to-face interview, that's the conventional way to recruit. But these days, people are getting inundated with applications, for instance, and we think, oh my goodness, we're getting overloaded. We need to actually have an additional step, a pre-screening, it's a psychometric test, it's some sort of online thing that the candidate has to go through in order for me to figure out, okay, which are the 100 out of 1,000 that I really want to progress to, the telephone call. What is are new technologies coming in at that stage of the recruitment funnel in Thailand? And if so, are the candidates tolerant of this? And yeah, like where are we with I guess assessment tech in this market?
I can start. So yeah, I'm gonna use this range of assessments. Some of them tailored more towards leadership candidates. Some of them tailored towards analytical skills and other kind of key skills for that area. It is never or rarely really used as a way to fail a candidate or make a decision based on that, but it is a supporting piece in the process overall. In the areas or departments where we have a lot of application, it helps us to kind of make decisions faster. And it's always at the end of the day a human that kind of reviews those results and makes a decision, because of course there are other potential things happening. That person might fail one time but be great next time, and so on. Maybe it's a past candidate. So there's other things we can look at for a candidate, and assessments kind of help us be faster with decision making at the very least. So.
What are your thoughts, Maka? For a Thai-based company, is it considered okay to use technical tests of this type? Is it unusual in any way? Are there any sorts of tests that don't perform well according to what we want, like in terms of like conversion rates, numbers of people taking them, and stuff like this?
Yeah, we use psychometrics, so cognitive testing is in there, numerical, verbal, of course, also. That's standard for the whole organization, so everyone would take that step at one point. Where it may differ will be in the number of rounds of interviews you may have, whether it be 1 or 2 or 3. Some of the business units may want to run case studies, which are great, but those things aren't standardized across the whole organization. They're just kind of at the hiring manager's behest, which is good. So can be pretty rigorous. It shouldn't be easy to get in, of course, and we're starting to look towards and have started doing a little bit on speaking with vendors for AI assistance, for screening, for summarizing, for shortlisting. Haven't yet put those in play, but they're progressive conversations, so we should have those in the beginning of 2025.
Yeah, very good. How about your side on the third-party side, Gary? Are people tolerant of doing assessments, or does it make sense for a third-party player to do that?
We don't do so much. And the reason being that typically we're talking to more senior candidates whose resumes speak for themselves, and reference checking and all that kind of stuff. So the time that we might recommend it is if the client really can't decide between 2 candidates, then have the assessments done and then just use those as a tool to make a decision. But there are some crazy things that happen in Thailand, and one of my favorite ones was we had a CFO calling us. She was 45, 50 years old, and she had accepted a job with a local company. And the assessment that they did for her was to match her birth date and time to her manager. And there was a conflict, and they rescinded the offer. She'd already resigned from her company, and insane. So we tried to help her as quickly as we could, but I'd never heard of that kind of assessment before. But as I said earlier, every day is a learning day in Thailand.
How interesting. I think there's all kinds of weird cultural things that do occur that people aren't quite aware of. Isn't it true in Japan? I don't know whether there's any folks watching this in Japan, but like they really care about blood groups and stuff. So is there such a thing as like matching people's blood groups and whatnot? It's like weird.
Not in Thailand that I'm aware of. No.
Don't quote me on this, but I think every culture will probably have little heuristics that would look completely baffling to outsiders. But there's like deep cultural context behind why some of these things are in play. So yeah, very, very interesting.
It seems,
Let's talk about
not, I was sorry, I was going to add on to that what Gary is saying. I think the numbers are quite significant. People will go to the monk to ask what day they should get married, and respect that and do that. And I think also I've heard the example before when birth dates are used in some kind of assessment on the suitability, which is fascinating in itself, but also a little bit, to someone uninitiated, quite weird in itself.
Yeah, very, very. It just reminds me a lot of East Asian stuff where numerology is very, very important. And there's kind of this belief that there's externalities beyond human agency that need to be respected. And you consult the experts to give you guidance on some of this. So yeah, very, very interesting. Let's switch to technology. Maka, you mentioned you're investigating sort of vendors and stuff. Is there local recruitment technology businesses here in Thailand that service the Thai market, or is it pretty much okay? We've got to go and look at I don't know, an Australian vendor or a European vendor, US vendor, and whatnot, and hope for a localized price, I guess. How does it work?
Yeah, there's quite a few locally. I mean, there is obviously probably a large percentage overall in Singapore. But I would say, without trying to advertise, and I'm not on commission, one of the best ATS vendors we don't use necessarily in the local market is Manatal, Manatal, which also has a lot of the AI builds as well. Very smart company, very easy to use tracking system. But they're in country. I think there's one or two others I've spoken with over time that are Thailand based. But if you speak with 10 organizations, you're probably going to speak with at least 60% of them would be Singapore, Australia. It's just really great to get that local time zone support. I mean, I would say ATS like Greenhouse is excellent, but the support has always historically been from the US, so completely opposite time zone doesn't really work. But yeah, there's some smart tech coming up, and some smart tech in place certainly.
Yeah, agreed on that. I think from Agoda's perspective, we typically use more global vendors, right? Just because of the scale, but also because of the need to really service many different markets, many different offices around the world, right? On the AI, actually, we also, since we have quite a strong engineering hub here, one of the cool things that actually have happened on the AI is that we are building kind of our own small applications of AI across maybe people team and other teams. It helps us, for instance, kind of understand and propose a CV coming in for a recruiter to review, right? That CV, it kind of helps to maybe, well, not rank because they all come in the order they come in, but if a recruiter reviews, maybe it suggests, look, this person, for a software engineer, they have great computer science degree from a great school. They have the right relevant years of experience. They have the right title. They have mentioned maybe the programming language we're using, and so on and so on. And it's not really kind of used in any authoritative way. It's just kind of almost helping us to review the CV faster in some way. So I'm very excited about it because it's kind of helping our entire team more efficient. I think our recruiters kind of like when this is basically making our lives easier and more efficient. So I can see how it's already applied at Agoda to a certain extent. And it's something that is just an interesting test and experiment to really work with, right? Applying to different parts of the process, to different roles, and just learning, and also kind of giving it the instructions we want, right? So, okay, did we hire from new companies? Maybe we should start highlighting those at the CVs because they have some really good candidates, as an example.
I think one of the impacts of artificial intelligence is obviously reducing the cost to build. And there's no question that companies that have engineering resource internally, I think, will increasingly produce their own apps and solutions that will be optimized for their own usage. And then, perhaps even more importantly, will be fully on premise, fully sort of data secure with regards to using your own internal data. So I've got a pet theory basically that the buy versus build sort of decision that a lot of us have to make. Maybe 10 years time it's going to be build internally or build externally. The customization is going to be very, very rapid. Quickly switching tack to sourcing candidates, attracting candidates. How do I find people here? Is it everyone is plugged into LinkedIn in a global perspective. I'm assuming LinkedIn isn't a particularly powerful thing here, or is it? Is there another social network? Are there other places where I can do candidate sourcing?
Yeah, LinkedIn doesn't really cover Thailand. It isn't connected, much like Finland, say, where 99% of people who are working are on LinkedIn. It's word of mouth for us. We just spread the word. Simple as that.
So it's pretty old school. Your networking, your black book's
Yep.
still there. You've got to just compile your own data and then work that way. Yeah.
Yeah, I started in this business before LinkedIn, and they were supposed to put us out of business, but they haven't. So we're still here. It's word of mouth at the level we work at.
Yeah, fantastic. How about you guys? What are your thoughts on the sources for candidates? There could be people here listening in somehow getting a job to say you need to recruit a such and such in Bangkok. How do they get start by doing that?
I think one of the more lively that I see is JobsDB, which is powered by Seek.com, I think, which is regional. But we seem to get a lot more traffic there than we do on LinkedIn. I use a lot of LinkedIn. I've done for a long time. It still has its value. But I would also go back to what Gary was saying before, that if I have a colleague who's trying to connect a candidate and gets nowhere, and then I go in and say, "Hey, you open for work," then suddenly I get a reply because I'm the head of that team, which is a bit odd in itself. But that's the way it goes. A couple of other boards, Job BKK, Job Thai, but they're standard job board. Word of mouth, we're quite a popular organization. We're quite a well-known organization. We get a lot of referrals, I think around 42% this year alone, referrals, conversion, which I've never seen that before. I've always kind of worked between 18 and 25% referrals year on year. So we're doing well there. And that comes back to, as was said, word of mouth.
Yeah, fantastic. How are you, Andre?
Yeah, I concur. I think in the local market, we don't typically need to source. I think a lot of our sourcing, a lot of my team is focused on really kind of global sourcing, bringing in the leadership talent, the technical talent from abroad. I think locally, it's a lot about, as I kind of mentioned previously, the referrals on a university presence. Career side works very well. Maybe because I guess the behaviors are still kind of more traditional in terms of just going on a career site and applying. LinkedIn works for more senior talent, I think, overall. And as Gary said, it doesn't cover the entire market by any means. And then there's JobsDB, JobsThai, and kind of local job boards. That's pretty much, I guess, the main areas.
Yeah, very, very good. Fascinating stuff, gents. Really, really appreciate you sharing your knowledge here. This is, I don't know, there seems to me like so much more to talk about. I'm sure there is as well. We could do another 10 hours of this. But Brain Food Live obviously has to come off air at some point, and we're coming towards the end of this. So let's do a quick round robin to address people who, let's say, they've got a contract, they're moving, they've just, hey, I've decided to come to Thailand to be a recruiter. What's your one piece of advice to that person in order for them to land well and then have a successful and productive time over here? What are your thoughts here? Let's go with you first, Gary.
I was hoping I was going to be last on this one, but there you go. Well, if you're going to come to Thailand to look for work, please have some Thailand experience or some Southeast Asian experience before you come, because straight off the boat isn't going to help for us in the senior jobs that we're looking at. If they've worked in Hong Kong, Singapore, somewhere in Asia, please. But straight off the boat from Bradford, no, ain't going to work.
There's something about Yorkshire going on here. Sheffield got a call out earlier. Now Bradford. Luckily, I'm on the other side of the border in Manchester.
I only name those towns because I've never been there. If I'd been there, I would have a better opinion of them. I need to travel more.
I was going to say we need to get Gary to recruiting in Bradford in some ways. It seems to be the reverse. Yeah, no, but really good. Get some I guess life experience. I mean, even popping in and doing a couple of weeks and having a look see. I don't mean just staying on a beach, but you know what I mean. You try and interact a little bit with the local community. It's got to be a plus. What about you, Maka?
Well, go ahead, before you leave me, one thing I do say to people is you're unlikely to find a job remotely, and I know this because I've done this twice in 2 countries. Move to Thailand, get yourself settled, sort yourself out, start mixing with the foreign business community or the local community, whatever you want to do. Start making connections, because then people will take you seriously, that you're on the ground, you're actually looking for work, and these are the skills you have to offer. Something will come up, but don't expect to do it from the UK or the US or France or Australia. You need to be with us here in Bangkok doing it properly.
Yeah, I think that's generally sound advice. I know we're in a remote world these days, but the reality of it is nothing beats being sort of that level of commitment, right? The sense of commitment. Every recruiter's taught this anyway. Always avoid relocators. I remember that was one of the first lessons I had when I was a recruitment agent way back when. And this is within country. It was like, okay, there's an additional logistical burden there that the candidate has to think about, and that's just going to be a barrier to cross, and it's going to be a risk for you as a recruiter. So yeah, being in person, and obviously great excuses. Obviously, Thailand is a very hospitable place, huge tourist hub, and very affordable for people who might want to come visit. I'm sure it's on the map for a lot of people just for a holiday anyway. So that's the first thing. It's accessible to you. Maka, your advice?
I would say, don't assume that the way you've been successful before, the way you've worked before, will be the roadmap for how you're going to be successful here. Because of, as we've discussed, around society and hierarchical and so on, very, very different. Come in with an open mind, learn as you go. I think I'd tag on to that also, localize as quickly as possible. It's quite easy to stay in an expat community. It's quite easy to go to, food and drink expat places. When we came over, we went straight into a Thai community, local neighbors. You really have a steep learning curve, but it's the best way to do. The regret I have is that I didn't pick up the language earlier on and do one of those kind of 4 to 6 week intensive courses in Thai, because that would have made things so much smoother. So I think the localization is absolutely key. But just take to mind that what you've always done before might not always work in this environment.
No, great advice, Maka. We haven't even touched on language. Again, that could be something we dive into a little bit further. I assume it's probably quite a challenge because it is a very different language. It looks like and sounds like from obviously any European type of tongue, but even from sort of Asian tongues, it sounds like there's a significant distance. But anyway,
it's very tonal. We're monotone from the UK, and Thailand is such a tonal language. There are the same word with 2 different tones, which mean 2 different things. Even to the extent of them being opposites of each other based on the tone. So yeah, it's quite something to navigate.
Yeah, just almost another dimension of meaning that isn't obvious to people in a non-tonal sort of linguistic experience. So yeah, very interesting. Andre, final word to you. A bit of advice. Maybe you give yourself advice. Let's say if you could teleport back in time 3.5 years before you got on the plane, what would you say? Hey, Andre, man, do this. It'll make your life better.
You know what? I'll say that too, but let me start with one relatively basic thing that I think we kind of skipped over in this group, which is there are some jobs that foreigners cannot do in Thailand. And even to get the work visa here, there are certain requirements in terms of years of experience in that industry that you need to have in order to even be qualified for the visa. So I just want to say, for anybody interested in potentially career in Thailand, this is some research you got to do. There are jobs that are not classified as highly skilled that you might not be legally capable of doing here. And then even for the jobs that you need to have certain requirements to be able, for you to be eligible for that company to essentially hire you into Thailand. So just want to call this out, really important. Otherwise, a lot of your research or applications might not be leading you where you need to, right? Or where you wanted to. What advice would I give myself coming in? I think just kind of similar to what gentlemen have highlighted here, being on site and being part of local culture is great. I also think worrying less back then would have been great too. I think I worried a little bit too much about how it's going to work, language barrier, cultural barrier. At the end of the day, it was a very smooth transition with not really much culture shock happening. So I think back then I would tell myself, worry less. It's going to be all right. you're gonna love it here.
No, that's great final words. And absolutely, fortune favors the brave here. We could spend a lot of time kind of worrying ourselves out of sort of opportunity. We can't do that. So if you do get the chance to experience different cultures and work in different places, give it a shot. Worst case scenario is you're going to come back with a lot more experience, a lot more knowledge, a lot more self-awareness, and that's going to empower you going forward, no matter where or when you decide to do those things. So fantastic stuff. Okay, let's close it here. Thanks for coming on to the show, everyone. Gary, thanks for waking up early. When's your flight, sir? You're coming in tonight or something, aren't you?
Tomorrow night, arriving Sunday afternoon, and I'll see you Sunday evening.
There's a chance maybe I fly out on Sunday. But if you can make it, then let me know. We
right.
might just be on time. But yeah, absolutely love to see you, Gary.
Okay.
But you have a safe journey, sir. Great to have you on the show.
Thank you.
Maka, wonderful to see you. Thanks for joining. Great to have your experience here. And Andre, of course, great to see you. And thank you so much for joining in the middle of your day as well. Great to get your experience on this. Folks, that's about it. Let's say goodbye to our guest, Gary. Take it easy. I will say goodbye also to Maka. Take it easy, sir. And Andre will also say goodbye. Great stuff, everybody. Thanks for watching. We'll be back next week. Again, we've got a different schedule because I will be in Australia next week. And we're going to be doing kind of a rinse and repeat of that. Hiring in Australia 2024 and beyond. What does that look like? We've got a wonderful panel to join us for that. We've got, again, agency side, people working in events business. We've got technology founders. We've got direct recruiters also. It's going to be another fascinating show. So make sure you sign up for this. If you've enjoyed this show, make sure you follow the channel also. I do a live stream every week. It's my pleasure to do this for you. And yeah, we're going to keep on rolling. So as we go forward, next couple of weeks, by the way, I'm traveling like a bit of a maniac. So it'll be a different location next 2 or 3 weeks in a row. So hopefully you enjoy joining me on the Brain Food World Tour. Okay, that's it.